You've tried the 5 a.m. wake-ups. You've read the books about atomic habits and deep work and eating the frog. You've downloaded the apps, bought the planners, set the alarms. You've had stretches, maybe weeks, maybe a few months, where it felt like things were clicking. And then they stopped. And now you're in this weird middle place. You're not lazy. You know what you need to do. You sit down to do it. And something happens, or rather, nothing happens. You drift. You procrastinate. You do a version of the work that feels hollow. Check the clock, and wonder when you stopped being the person who actually had their life together. Here's the thing nobody tells you clearly. The entire productivity industry is built on a flawed premise. It assumes that the goal is to squeeze more output out of yourself, that discipline is the key, suffering is the price, and if you're not grinding, you're failing. That assumption is wrong, and there is a growing body of psychological research that doesn't just question it, it inverts it. What if the first step to doing more isn't more discipline? What if it's feeling better? That's what this video is about. And by the end of it, you won't just understand why you've been stuck. You'll have a completely different operating system for how you think about getting things done. Stay with me. This one matters. Let me tell you exactly what this video is going to do. You're going to walk away from this with a full framework. 3 ways to energize yourself so work actually feels good. 3 emotional blockers that cause procrastination and exactly how to remove them. And 3 ways to sustain all of it so you don't burn out in 3 weeks. 9 concepts. All of them grounded in real research. All of them counterintuitive enough to actually be useful. The framework comes from Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity. And it begins with a study you might not have heard of. But once you do, you'll see your relationship with work differently. Here's the scene. A psychologist named Alice Eason divides people into 2 groups. She gives one group a small gift, a bag of candy, before asking them to solve a classic creativity puzzle called the candle problem. The puzzle requires seeing a box of thumbtacks not as a container, but as a candle holder. The candy group, the people who felt slightly better before starting, were significantly more likely to solve the problem. Not because they were smarter, not because they tried harder, because they felt better. This is the beginning of a theory called broaden and build, developed by psychologist Barbara Fredrickson. The core claim: positive emotions don't just feel nice. They literally change how your brain operates. They broaden your awareness, open up more possible solutions, and build the cognitive, social, and emotional resources you'll use for months after. Positive emotions are not the reward for being productive. They are the mechanism of productivity. Success doesn't lead to feeling good. Feeling good leads to success. That's the entire thesis. Everything else is how to engineer it. Let's go. Let's start with a Nobel Prize winner who was bored of his job. Richard Feynman was, on paper, one of the greatest physicists of his generation. Cornell professor, brilliant mind. And by his late 20s, completely burned out. He couldn't write a paper, couldn't think. He was going through the motions. And then one day, in the university cafeteria, he watched a student toss a plate in the air. He noticed the Cornell logo on the plate wobbled at a different rate than the plate itself. No practical consequence. No journal article waiting on the other end. Just a weird, interesting observation. He started working on the equations that explained it. His colleagues were confused. "Why are you wasting time on spinning plates?" they asked. "There's no importance whatsoever," Feynman told them. "I'm just doing it for the fun of it." The equations he developed to explain those spinning plates eventually contributed to his work on quantum electrodynamics. That work won him the Nobel Prize. At least 6 Nobel Prize laureates have credited play as central to their greatest breakthroughs. James Watson and Francis Crick described discovering DNA structure as playing with molecular models. Alexander Fleming called his discovery of penicillin playing with microbes. The pattern is not a coincidence. Play is the first energizer, and most adults have been conditioned to believe it's the enemy of serious work. But here's what play actually does neurologically. When we play, we release dopamine, the reward hormone that drives motivation and focus. We engage more of our brain. We enter what psychologists call a state of psychological relief, a loosening of the threat detection mechanisms that narrow our thinking and make us defensive. In play, the stakes are lower, and when the stakes are lower, our creativity expands. Now, play doesn't mean ditching your responsibilities. It means incorporating the spirit of play into how you approach your work. There are 3 specific ways to do this. The first, create an adventure. Research from New York University and the University of Miami tracked people's GPS locations over several months and sent them text messages asking about their emotional state. The finding was consistent. People who moved through more varied, random, adventurous locations, a new coffee shop, a different route to work, an unfamiliar neighborhood, reported higher levels of happiness, excitement, and relaxation. Adventure isn't just fun. It actively generates positive emotion, and you can bring it into your work with something as small as finding your play personality. Psychologist Dr. Stuart Brown, after interviewing 5,000 people about what play meant to them, identified 8 recurring types: the collector, the competitor, the explorer, the creator, the storyteller, the joker, the director. If you're a storyteller, you might reframe a dry logistics email as a narrative: beginning, middle, end, unexpected twist. If you're a creator, you might turn a spreadsheet into an infographic. The point is that your natural mode of play can be injected into almost any task. The second way, find the fun. There's a Mary Poppins song that sounds trivial, but is psychologically precise. In every job that must be done, there is an element of fun. You find the fun and snap, the job's a game. The question that changed how Abdaal worked. What would this look like if it were fun? He stuck a post-it note with those 9 words on his computer monitor. The next day, facing a session of memorizing biochemistry for his medical exams, he asked the question. The first answer: put the Lord of the Rings soundtrack on. The music didn't make biochemistry more interesting, but it made it feel fundamentally different to sit with. That's the key. Fun doesn't have to be baked into the task itself. It can be wrapped around the task. Music, a different location, a friend, a self-imposed game. The question isn't, is this task inherently enjoyable? It's, how could I make the experience of doing this more enjoyable? And there's a deeper version of finding the fun, one discovered by watching rock climbers at the Olympics. The climbers in Tokyo shared something unusual. They were smiling, chatting, even sharing tips with competitors during the event. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the pioneer of flow theory, first developed his ideas watching climbers and identified what set them apart. They were focused on the process of climbing, not the outcome, not the podium, the wall in front of them right now. When you focus on the outcome, the gap between where you are and where you want to be creates pressure. When you focus on the process, that gap disappears. There's just this move, this sentence, this task, right now. The third way, lower the stakes. Mark Rober, a NASA engineer turned science educator, recruited 50,000 people for a coding challenge. Half received a straightforward error message when they got something wrong. The other half received the same error, but with an arbitrary penalty. You've lost 5 points. The group that lost points made less than half as many attempts to solve the puzzle. The penalty was meaningless. There was no real consequence, but the perception of stakes was enough to make people quit. This is what stress does to play. When the stakes feel high, play disappears. And when play disappears, creativity disappears. And when creativity disappears, you're stuck grinding, and grinding doesn't work. So the reframe Rober suggests is simple. Treat your failures as data points, not verdicts, not evidence of your character, just information. If your goal is to build a business and your first product flops, that's not a failure. It's a data point about what your market doesn't want. If your first YouTube video gets 12 views, that's not humiliation. That's your first rung on the learning curve. And there's one final piece to lowering the stakes. From philosopher Alan Watts, his distinction. Don't be serious. Be sincere. The serious person at a board game cares so much about winning that they drain the fun from everyone around them. The uncaring person doesn't engage, but the sincere person plays to the fullest, fully invested in the experience, not fixated on the result. That's the posture that makes work sustainable. Sincere, not serious. Here's something I'll come back to later in the video. Play is one energizer, but there's a specific kind of energy, the kind that comes from believing you actually can do a thing that's different. And it's the energizer most people try to fake instead of build properly. In the year 2000, Reed Hastings flew to Dallas to sell Netflix to Blockbuster. They wanted $50 million. Blockbuster's CEO laughed. 10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Netflix is worth $300 billion. One of the central explanations for Netflix's transformation from a joke to a juggernaut is a single word: not hustle, not vision. The word is power. Specifically, the sense of personal empowerment their chief talent officer, Patty McCord, embedded into the company's culture. She eliminated traditional vacation policies, rigid work hours, and bureaucratic performance reviews. She gave employees control over their own work. She trusted them with their own judgment. What happened? Better ideas, better retention, better everything. That sense of internal ownership, the feeling that your work is yours, your decisions matter, your judgment is trusted, is the second energizer. And it's not something you seize from others. It's something you generate in yourself. There are 3 ways to build it. First, boost your confidence. In 1977, Canadian-American psychologist Albert Bandura introduced one of the most replicated concepts in all of psychology: self-efficacy. The simple idea that it's not just your actual abilities that determine your performance, it's your belief about your abilities. And after a century of research, the conclusion is consistent. People who believe they can do a thing are dramatically more likely to actually do it. But what's more surprising is how malleable confidence is. A group of researchers at the University of Illinois recruited exercise-averse women and had them cycle. Then, without any connection to their actual performance, they told half of them they were among the fittest of their peers, and the other half they were among the least fit. Completely made up. Several days later, the high-confidence group enjoyed exercise significantly more and performed significantly better when the intensity increased. The belief changed the performance, not the other way around. So how do you build it? Start with what Abdaal calls flipping the confidence switch. When you don't feel confident, you ask yourself, what would it look like if I were confident doing this? Not pretend to be someone else. Not fake it indefinitely. Just ask the question, and then behave as if the answer is true. Abdaal used this as a walk-around magician at university parties. He was terrified. He'd breathe, flip the switch internally, I am playing the part of a confident magician, and walk into groups of strangers with a smile. It worked. Every time. The second confidence method is vicarious mastery. Albert Bandura also found that simply watching someone similar to you succeed at a task dramatically increases your belief that you can too. A study at Clemson University had children climb a rock wall. One group watched a video of someone climbing it first, just watching. And that group climbed significantly better, felt more confident, and enjoyed the experience more. The implication is immediate. Want to feel like you can write a book? Read books by people who once felt exactly like you do now and wrote them anyway. Want to believe you can build a business? Listen to podcasts from people who built one from their bedroom with no credentials and no connections. The belief doesn't come before the evidence. The belief is the evidence. You just have to borrow it from someone else's story until you accumulate your own. Second way to build power: level up your skills. Phil Jackson, the coach who led the Chicago Bulls to 6 NBA championships, built his entire philosophy on a Zen concept called Shushin, beginner's mind. The idea: approach every task as if you're encountering it for the first time, with curiosity, with humility, without fixed assumptions about how it must be done. It sounds like it would make you less competent. It actually makes you more, because beginners are willing to try things that experts have already decided won't work. Beginners make the mistakes that are the fastest route to real learning. And there's a powerful acceleration of this learning, the protege effect. A Stanford study gave two groups of students identical biology material. One group studied to pass a test. The other group studied to teach the material to a simulated avatar. The group that had to teach learned more, measurably, significantly more. You don't need to be an expert to teach. You need to be one step ahead. And the act of explaining something to someone else is one of the fastest ways to understand it yourself. Third way, take ownership. In the 1980s, psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan developed self-determination theory. One of its core findings: when people feel they have genuine autonomy over their work, when they feel like they're choosing it, not just suffering through it, their motivation is fundamentally different. It lasts longer. It feels different. It produces better results. Here's the practice that unlocks this, even in situations where you have very little control. The shift from have to choose to. Abdaal tells the story of being asked to insert an IV drip at the end of a long shift, exhausted, furious about it internally, and then overhearing a patient talking about how much she appreciated the care she was receiving. He stopped. He couldn't choose whether to do the task, but he could choose his relationship to it. I choose to do this. I get to do this. A 2021 study confirmed this isn't just positive thinking. Participants who were asked to write about their choices, I chose to wake up early, I chose to eat what I ate, subsequently rated themselves as stronger, more capable, and more in control than participants who wrote about the same events without the language of choice. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, put it simply: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. You can't always control what you work on. You can almost always control how you work on it. And you can always control what you tell yourself about why you're doing it. That ownership, however small, is what power feels like. In 1971, Brian Eno was nobody, a recent art school graduate with some cassette recordings and zero career trajectory. He was waiting for a train when he ran into a musician named Andy Mackay, who invited him to a gig. Eno went. The energy in the room changed something in him. He walked into a scene, a scenius, as he'd later call it, a community of people who were all pushing each other into territory none of them would have found alone. That chance encounter led directly to Roxy Music, and a career that would eventually include producing some of the most significant albums of the late 20th century. Scene changes people. Community changes people. The right people in your orbit do something that no productivity system can replicate. They generate energy in you. Researchers call it relational energy. In a 2003 study, psychology professors mapped the people inside organizations by asking employees to identify who left them feeling energized after an interaction and who left them drained. The results were strikingly consistent. And further research over the following 15 years confirmed something simple. Energizing people are the single biggest predictor of an energized work environment. There are 3 things you can do to harness this. First, adopt the comrade mindset. Stanford researchers Gregory Walton and Priyanka Carr ran a study where people worked on puzzles in separate rooms. In one group, participants received a tip and were told it came from a scientist. In another group, participants received the exact same tip and were told it came from a fellow participant. The group that believed they had a human ally working alongside them worked 48% longer on the puzzle. Not because they had help, just because they felt they had a partner. The comrade mindset is the shift from working in parallel to working together. It's the difference between viewing the people around you as competitors, people whose wins are your losses, and comrades, people whose wins are also yours. Even if you're working alone, you can ask, who are the people trying to build something similar to me? And how can I make them feel like teammates instead of threats? You'll find that when you start helping people around you win, a strange thing happens. You start winning too. Second, feel the helper's high. Alan Lux ran Big Brothers Big Sisters of New York City. It was hard, often sad work, and yet he noticed something counterintuitive. Volunteers often left difficult sessions more energized than when they arrived. He interviewed thousands of them. 95% reported feeling happier and more fulfilled as a result of their service. The reason is neurological. When we help others, our brains release oxytocin and endorphins, the same hormones released during exercise and positive social connection. The helper's high is real. The application is simple. Build small acts of kindness into your day, not grand gestures. Random acts. Making a colleague tea. Writing an unexpected thank you note. Letting someone go ahead of you in line. These micro moments of giving trigger chemistry that changes how you feel for hours. And here's the counterintuitive flip side. Asking for help also produces this effect. The Benjamin Franklin effect shows that when you ask someone for a favor, they like you more, not less. They've invested in you. They want you to succeed. And in asking, you've given them the gift of feeling useful. Most of us drastically underestimate how willing people are to help. Research shows we underestimate it by up to 50%. So ask. Third, over-communicate. When Abdaal launched his business, the mistake he made most consistently was under-communicating, not sharing enough, not celebrating enough, not giving feedback enough in either direction. The research on this is clear. In relationships, the biggest predictor of longevity isn't conflict. It's how people respond to each other's good news. Psychologist Shelley Gable identified 4 types of responses to good news: active, constructive, enthusiastic, engaged, building on the moment, is the one that strengthens relationships and energizes both people. Everything else, from the passive that's nice to the active destructive, doesn't that mean you'll be too busy for us? Erodes the connection. So when someone in your life shares a win, make it bigger. Reflect back the effort you witnessed. Express excitement about what comes next. You're not flattering them. You're doing what the psychology of human connection says actually works. And when you need to share something difficult, over-communicate that too, but with candor rather than harsh honesty. Kim Scott's radical candor makes the distinction. Honest implies you know the truth. Candid means here's what I see. Can you help me understand it? It's collaborative, not confrontational, and it keeps the relationship intact. I told you there's a specific kind of energy that most people try to fake instead of building. That's self-efficacy, confidence in your ability. And I told you there's a way to accumulate it from other people's stories. That's what vicarious mastery is. Now here's what I haven't told you yet. You can have all 3 of these energizers working: play, power, people, and still be stuck. Because there are 3 specific emotional states that act like locks on your ability to start, and they have nothing to do with motivation. In fact, the "you just need to be more motivated" advice is the most harmful thing the productivity industry has ever said. Here's what's actually in the way. Most productivity advice treats procrastination as a character flaw. You're lazy. You lack discipline. You need to want it more. But procrastination isn't a discipline problem. It's a feeling problem. When we feel bad, we avoid. When we avoid, we feel worse. And the cycle deepens. The unblock method doesn't ask you to push harder through the resistance. It asks, what's causing the bad feeling in the first place? Remove the cause, and the resistance dissolves on its own. There are 3 causes, 3 blockers, and each has a specific antidote. Picture yourself driving at night in heavy fog. You slow down. You squint. Eventually, if it's bad enough, you pull over entirely. Not because you don't want to get where you're going, because you can't see where you're going. This is the fog of uncertainty, and it's the first driver of procrastination. Researchers measure something called intolerance of uncertainty and find it's one of the strongest predictors of anxiety and avoidance. When the path ahead is unclear, our brains interpret the ambiguity as threat. We overestimate what's at stake. We become hypervigilant. We stop seeing safety cues. We avoid. The solution isn't more motivation. It's more clarity. Specifically, you need to answer 3 questions. Why? Borrowed from military doctrine, the concept of commander's intent, the idea is simple. No plan survives contact with the enemy. So instead of planning every step, you lock in the purpose. Why are you doing this at all? What's the end state that actually matters? In the 1944 D-Day invasion, paratroopers landed in completely the wrong locations. The detailed plan fell apart immediately. But because everyone knew the commander's intent, the purpose behind the operation, they adapted. They took different villages. They still won. When you're stuck, ask, what is the purpose of this? Not what am I supposed to do next? That's the what. First comes the why. And if you're not sure, use the 5 whys, ask why 5 times in a row, drilling down until you hit your actual motivation. It's almost always different from what you thought it was. What? Once you have the why, you need specific goals. But not smart goals. Research suggests highly specific outcome-based goals can create tunnel vision, erode intrinsic motivation, and cause the very anxiety they're meant to resolve. What works instead? Nice goals. Near-term, input-based, controllable, energizing. Daily or weekly. Focused on what you can do, not what the world has to deliver back to you. Write 200 words today instead of finish the book. Do 30 minutes of exercise today instead of lose 20 pounds. The input is in your hands. The outcome isn't always. When? If you don't know when you're doing something, you almost certainly won't do it. The research on implementation intentions is some of the most consistent in all of behavioral science. If X, then I will Y. When I sit down with my coffee in the morning, I will open the document and write for 20 minutes. Not I'll try to write this week. A specific trigger married to a specific action. The people who did this in a study of exercise habits increased their daily step count by 28%. The people who just had the goal didn't change at all. The second blocker is fear. Alex Honnold climbed El Capitan, 3,000 feet of vertical rock, without a rope. Brain imaging revealed the reason. His amygdala, the brain's threat detector, shows barely any activation in situations that would trigger fear in almost anyone else. The rest of us aren't Alex Honnold. Our amygdalas fire at interview panels and blank pages and difficult conversations. And when they fire, we freeze, we avoid, we procrastinate. Fear isn't the problem. Unacknowledged fear is the problem. The first step. Name it. A study where people faced a tarantula found that participants who were instructed to label their emotional experience, I feel anxious and disgusted and terrified, were substantially more likely to approach the spider, more likely to touch it, and more likely to see their fear reduce over time. Naming an emotion activates the prefrontal cortex. It quiets the amygdala. Labeling your fear literally changes its neurological impact. So when you're stuck, ask, what am I actually afraid of? Not the surface excuse, not I don't have time or the idea isn't ready yet. What's the real fear? Is it a me fear, I'm not good enough, I'm not prepared, or a them fear, people won't like it, I'll be judged? The second step, shrink the fear with perspective. The 10-10-10 rule. Will this matter in 10 minutes, in 10 weeks, in 10 years? Most of the things we catastrophize about don't survive the 10-year question. The job rejection, the bad first video, the uncomfortable conversation. From 10 years out, they barely register. And once you see that, the paralysis releases. The third step, overcome the fear through an alter ego. Beyoncé does it. Adele does it. Before Adele could perform in front of massive crowds, she was terrified. She invented Sasha Carter, an amalgamation of Beyoncé's Sasha Fierce and country legend June Carter, a fearless, electric, unstoppable performer. When she stepped on stage, she wasn't Adele the anxious singer. She was Sasha Carter. This is called the Batman effect. A study with children found that kids told to imagine themselves as superheroes during a difficult task showed significantly better focus, self-control, and perseverance than kids who approached the task as themselves. You don't need to be an actor to use this. Find a character who embodies the confidence you need. Give them a name. Have a physical trigger, a specific jacket, a pair of glasses, a posture. Step into them when you need to. It's not deception. It's borrowing from the part of you that already knows it can do this. The third blocker is inertia. Newton's first law applies to humans just as much as objects. An object at rest stays at rest. A person doing nothing stays doing nothing until acted on by an external force. Inertia is the most ordinary of all the blockers. It's not dramatic fear or paralyzing confusion. It's the simple, pervasive inability to start. And it's the most universal obstacle to getting things done. 3 ways through it. Reduce friction. A Dutch supermarket study placed a green inlay in shopping carts to designate where vegetables should go. Vegetable purchases increased by 50%. No persuasion, no health campaigns, just a tiny environmental cue that made the right choice the default choice. When Abdaal put his guitar in the middle of his living room instead of behind his bookshelf, he actually started playing it. Make what you want to do easier to start, and make what you don't want to do harder. Uninstall the apps that consume your attention. Put the book on your pillow. Put the running shoes by the front door. Define the next action step. Tim Peichel is one of the world's leading researchers on procrastination. When he finds himself putting something off, he asks one question: what's the next action step? Not what do I need to do about this project? What is the single next physical action? For yoga, it's roll out the mat. For the gym, it's put on the gym clothes. For the book, it's open the document. The task is never as bad as the anticipation of it. The 5-minute rule works for this reason. Commit to working on something for just 5 minutes. Most of the time, you keep going. And even when you don't, 5 minutes of progress is better than 0. Support yourself over time. Because inertia isn't just about getting started. It's also about the relapse, the good start that fades 2 weeks in. The solution: an accountability buddy, someone who has agreed to show up and check. The science here isn't complicated. Humans don't let people down as easily as they let themselves down. That peer pressure, weaponized with your consent, is one of the most powerful forces for sustained behavior change that exists. And when you do fall off, forgive yourself. Michael Wohl's study of procrastinating students found that the students who bounced back fastest weren't the ones who beat themselves up more. They were the ones who forgave themselves. I forgive myself. Now I can study. Shame deepens the hole. Self-forgiveness is the ladder out. Find the win in what you did do. And start again from there. On Christmas Eve 2020, Abdaal was lying face down on his sofa, on a FaceTime with his mom, telling her he couldn't work another day. His business was successful. He loved what he did, and he was completely burned out. His mom, a psychiatrist, pointed out something he hadn't considered. Burnout isn't reserved for people working 80-hour weeks in punishing conditions. The World Health Organization redefined it in 2019. Burnout is characterized by feelings of energy depletion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. It's not about hours, it's about how you feel. And here's what almost every productivity system misses. You can do all the right things on Monday and be burned out by Thursday, unless you've built the scaffolding that makes the whole thing last. There are 3 types of burnout, and 3 sustainers, 1 antidote to each. LeBron James is one of the fastest players in NBA history. He can sprint at 17 miles per hour, and in the 2018 season, he spent 74% of his court time walking. His average speed, one of the slowest in the league, and he's been one of the best players in the league for 19 consecutive years. Everyone around him sprinted constantly. He conserved. He saved his speed for when speed mattered. And by doing so, he built a career that outlasted almost everyone who tried to outwork him. Overexertion burnout comes from doing too much, too fast, without adequate rest in between. The antidote is learning to do less, which sounds simple and is deeply counterintuitive for high achievers. Concretely, create an energy investment portfolio. 2 lists. List A: everything you dream of doing someday. List B, what you're actively working on right now. The rule is that list B stays in single digits. When you're working on 12 things at once, each one gets a fraction of your attention and a fractured version of your energy. Choose fewer things. Go deeper. Let the rest wait on list A until you're genuinely ready. And learn to say no using Derek Sivers' simple filter. Hell yeah or no. If your honest reaction to a new commitment isn't enthusiastic, it's a no. Because the thing you're agreeing to isn't just a thing, it's a no to everything else you could be doing with that time. Every yes has an opportunity cost. The 6-week trap. You look at your calendar 6 weeks from now, see empty space, and think I'll have capacity then. You won't. Life doesn't open up on a schedule. If you wouldn't say yes to something happening tomorrow, don't say yes to it in 6 weeks. And within every working day, schedule breaks. Not as a treat, as a necessity. The most productive workers in a study of a software company worked at a 52 minutes on, 17 minutes off ratio. Breaks replenish the self-regulatory resource that makes focus possible. Without them, you're not pushing through. You're degrading. The second burnout type is depletion burnout. Here's a test. Make 2 lists. 1. What you actually do when you're exhausted and need to rest. 2. What actually makes you feel better. For most people, those lists look completely different. The first list has doom scrolling, binge watching, and lying on the couch in a semi-conscious state. The second has movement, creative work, time with specific people, time outside. We're resting wrong. And depletion burnout comes from months of resting wrong, depleting our reserves instead of refilling them. The best recharging activities share 4 qualities, captured in the acronym CALM. Competence. They build your skill over time. Autonomy. You have genuine control over how you do them. Liberty. They're separate from your work. Mellow. They're low stakes and relaxing. Painting, cooking, learning an instrument, writing for pleasure, building something physical, these are calm activities. Their defining feature is that they have no objective metric of success. You can't win or lose at a hobby, and that's precisely why they recharge you. Nature is the second recharging system. Roger Ulrich's research over 4 decades established that exposure to nature, even photographs of nature, even a 40-second view of a green roof, measurably reduces stress hormones and restores attentional capacity. You don't need a 7-hour hike. You need a plant on your desk, a 10-minute walk down a tree-lined street, or 7 minutes of recorded rainforest sounds before bed. And sometimes, the most energizing thing is to genuinely do nothing. The read-off principle. Grant yourself permission to write off a day, not with guilt, deliberately. Because doing nothing today is an investment in your capacity tomorrow. Abdaal's flatmate put it to him plainly one night when he was face down on the couch. If you're tired, why don't you just write off the evening and rest? That permission, explicit, guilt-free, changes the quality of the rest entirely. The third burnout type is misalignment burnout, and this is the slowest and most insidious of the 3. It's what happens when you spend years or decades being genuinely productive at things that don't actually matter to you. You're efficient, you're successful by external measures, and you're quietly hollowing out. The science here comes from Ken and Sheldon's research on what he calls the relative autonomy continuum. The question isn't just why are you doing something, it's how well does that reason align with your actual values. There's a difference between doing something for the money and doing something because the money enables the life you've chosen. Same external motivation, completely different internal experience. Misalignment burnout is diagnosed by asking 3 questions about your work. Does this contribute to your long-term values? Does it feel meaningful at the medium-term scale, weeks and months? And does it feel enjoyable or valuable right now, in the process? If the answer to all 3 is no, you're spending your energy in the wrong place. Not wrong by someone else's measure, wrong by yours. The alignment process isn't about quitting and following your bliss. It's about honest auditing. A simple wheel of life exercise. Rate the major domains: health, work, relationships, finances, personal growth, family, fun, environment, on how satisfied you are and how much time you're actually investing. The gaps reveal the misalignment. And then set alignment quests at 3 different timescales. In the near term, this week, what is one thing you can do to move slightly closer to what actually matters to you? In the medium term, the next year, what is one area of genuine misalignment that you're willing to address? And in the long term, what does it actually mean for you to flourish? Not what you think you're supposed to want, what you actually want. The values affirmation research is clear. People who regularly reflect on what matters most to them, even briefly, even without acting on it immediately, show lower stress responses, higher cognitive performance, and more consistent follow-through on their actual goals. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep asking the question. Here's what I want you to notice. This whole framework rests on a single premise that sounds obvious once you hear it and is completely invisible until you do. Your mood isn't the reward for doing good work. It's the prerequisite for it. Every piece of this, play, power, people, the 3 unblocks, the 3 sustainers, is designed to create the emotional conditions under which your best work becomes possible. Not to make you work harder, to make work feel like something worth doing. And if that idea resonates, if something in you shifted watching this, there's a question sitting underneath it that most productivity videos never touch. It's the question of what you actually want, not what you're supposed to want, what actually matters to you, and whether the way you're spending your time right now reflects that. I've made a video that goes directly there. It's the question underneath all productivity questions. And if you're someone who's good at executing, but sometimes wonders if you're executing on the right things, that video is exactly where you need to go next. Let me leave you with this. Ali Abdaal was a junior doctor on Christmas Day, alone on a hospital ward, drowning. He dropped a tray of supplies. He looked down at the floor, and something cracked open. Not the ambition, the approach. The idea that grinding harder was the answer. What he found, slowly, through the research, through trial and error, through a lot of failed experiments, was that the suffering was not the path. The path was learning to make the work feel better. Not easier, better. And the strange thing about making work feel better is that it also makes you better at it. More creative, more focused, more resilient, more connected to the people around you. The positive emotion isn't the consolation prize, it's the engine. So here's what I want you to carry from this video. Not a to-do list. A question. What would it look like if I approached my work and my life in a way that felt genuinely good? Not easier, not without challenge, not without hard days, but good, meaningful, worth it. Because if you've spent years believing that productivity requires suffering, that you have to trade your well-being for your results, you've been working with a broken map. The territory looks different than you think. You don't have to settle for staying afloat. You can learn how to swim. Tell me in the comments, which of the 9 concepts landed hardest for you? Play, power, people, the energizers, or one of the blockers, or the burnout types? I'll read every single one. And if this video was worth your time, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who's grinding themselves into the ground right now. They probably won't ask for help, but they might click on a YouTube video. See you in the next one.